Price of revenge is too high. Sometimes the price of revenge is too high. A story 20 years in the making. When I was 19, I met a woman named Ebony. Our love story went as so many young people's stories go. Hard lessons learned and heartbreak. During our time together, we had a lot of fights and arguments. She would say things to me like, "You're not shit," or "You're never going to be nothing." Basically, anything she knew could get under my skin and cause me harm. After about 2 years of this, I removed myself from the relationship because I could no longer take it. Even though the relationship was toxic and unhealthy, I do not regret it one bit because it taught me some valuable lessons about things that I'm no longer willing to tolerate in any future relationship going forward. Secondly, we had a son together, which in the end was well worth it. One of the last arguments we had before we separated, I told her the following: "In this game of life, I will not lose. I promise you this. When everything is said and done, I'll be on top and you won't. I hate losing, and I will not lose. I promise you this." I will never forget that conversation because it put a fire in me that day moving forward. When I left Ebony, I took my son with me. Eventually, I found a lovely woman and married her. Shortly after marriage, Ebony contacted me, asking me to take care of her daughter that she had with another man. Her reasoning was she wanted her daughter to at least be with her brother, and she had nowhere else to send her child. Luckily for her, my wife is an amazing woman. When I told her the situation, she immediately said, "Yes, we will take her." During this time, we had a total of 4 children, 3 for my wife and my son. My wife's response was, "We may not have a lot, but we have food on the table and a roof over our heads. That child needs us. I'm not going to sit here and let a child that has nowhere to go suffer." So my wife and I took the child in and raised her as our own. I told Ebony I would take the children and raise them. I also told her the following: "You do not have to pay me child support. You do not have to send any money. I want you to be with our kids and have a good relationship with them. But first, you need to be stable. So, here's the deal. I'm going to give you 5 years to go to school, get a college education, and make something of yourself. This way, you can be stable and help raise our kids together." Personally, I felt like this was a good deal for her. I was basically taking 2 children, one of them not biologically mine nor my responsibility, and raising them for the next 5 years. During this time, my wife and I went to school full-time, worked full-time jobs, and I also had a part-time job to put food on the table on the weekends. Over the next 5 years, I watched Ebony do absolutely nothing with her life. Every time I would contact her, she would be partying, drinking, and showing up with new tattoos. Over those 5 years, I would gently remind her what she should be doing with this time. In response, I was told to shut up. I was told multiple times that I'm not her father. I was told how weak and pathetic I am. I was called a piece of shit. Blah, blah, blah. After 5 years, my wife and I had dramatically improved our lifestyle. I came back to Ebony and asked her what she had done in those 5 years, even though I already knew the answer. Eventually, I ended up putting her on child support because she was doing absolutely nothing to help me support these kids at this point. And she had done absolutely nothing to better herself. Of course, after those 5 years of receiving literally no help, I'll take that back. That's not fair. She did send 1 hat and 1 jacket. I placed her on child support, and my lord, she flipped her crap. I was every name in the book. She yelled at me about how I was ruining her life. Even though I explained to her that paying $180 a month for 1 kid when I'm raising 2 of her kids is a really good deal, she didn't care. I also explained to her that the lunch for one of the children was $80 alone. None of this seemed to matter. Apparently, I was ruining her life on purpose, and it was so unfair, as she would tell me. By this time, I was pretty used to her crap. I kept my head down and worked harder with my wife to improve our life. But I never forgot, not even for 1 second, what I told her all those years ago. I will not lose. I hate losing. During this time, my wife and I got better jobs. We started working out, getting in shape, and focused on our family. At this point, 15 years had passed, and we were still raising all 5 of the children with no help from Ebony. During this time, she had to come to my state to talk to the judge about why she wasn't paying child support. At this time, she had not seen me or the children in over 5 years. When we got out of court, I had to literally beg her to come to my house so she could see the children because she was not going to. I'm not going to lie. What happened next was one of the best feelings of my life, and I will never forget it. Keep in mind, she was still telling me up to this very point, just a few days ago, how much of a piece of shit I am now. Ebony and her boyfriend pulled up at my house and got out of the car. I could see it all over their faces as they looked around the property. I greeted them, and as I was doing so, I noticed her jaw and mouth were literally open in amazement. The first thing her boyfriend said was, "Man, I'm not going to lie. You have a beautiful house and nice cars." Ebony said the same in disbelief. I remember Ebony asking me how much land I actually owned. So, wanting to rub it in her face a little bit, I took her to the edge of the road and pointed far into the distance and said, "You see that driveway way down there? I own everything from that point." Then I took her to the backyard, which is even more beautiful, and told her how much land I owned going back that direction. At this point, we had not even made it inside the house. When we got inside my home, I took her on a tour, and all I could hear throughout the walk was her boyfriend saying, "How beautiful my home was, Wes." He made the comment that I was doing it big over here, lol. During this time, Ebony had not seen my wife because she was in her office working and about to get off, but I was waiting for that moment. My wife had lost a lot of weight, started working out, got a tummy tuck, and was looking really good. I knew that would get to her, and it did get to her, because she brought it up the following week about how cute I must think my little bitch-ass wife is. Her words, not mine. My wife found it hilarious. As I was taking them around the house, I took them downstairs to my man cave and showed her boyfriend all my cool little toys, my multiple gaming monitors, the PlayStation 5 that had just come out 2 weeks prior, and my collection of guns. The more praise and props her boyfriend gave me, the angrier she got. I could see it on her face. Her boyfriend is actually a really nice guy. I had known him for years at that point. He was willing to give us props because he knew where my wife and I started. He knew we didn't have anything in the beginning. We were just living in a trailer, busting our asses to get something, and raising 5 kids all at the same time. As they were getting ready to leave, Ebony said, "I have to give it to you. You have a wonderful life, and you worked hard for it. Man, I wish I would have done the same." At this point, I gently reminded her of our conversation all those years ago, when I told her I'm not going to lose. Ebony looked me in the face and said, "You said you weren't going to lose, and you were right." I explained to Ebony at that time that I didn't hate her. I never hated her. Even after everything we've been through, all I ever wanted was the best for her and our children. That's why I was willing to take care of them and give her the opportunity to have the exact same things I had. Honestly, at that point, I think it finally started to click for her for the first time in all those years. I had no way of knowing this at the time, but that was the very moment when Ebony became severely depressed and started drinking very heavily. I would not find this information out until years later talking to her boyfriend. I knew she was drinking. I just didn't know it was that much. Over the next 2 years, she would sometimes call me up upset, angry, crying, or self-loathing. A lot of her anger towards me became passive-aggressive. She would make statements like, "We all don't have the perfect wife," or "We all can't take multiple vacations a year." At this point, all of my children were grown, or at least to the extent that Ebony and I no longer needed to have much, if any, conversations. Then one day, out of the blue, Ebony called me up. I could immediately tell that something was off. She wasn't sounding like herself. Ebony began to tell me that she was in the hospital and her liver was shutting down. The doctors told her that if she had one more drink, she would die. Keep in mind, I did not know she was drinking that much. As Ebony sat on the phone with me, all the hate and anger was gone. For the first time in almost 20 years, we had an emotional conversation that wasn't built off of anger. She cried on the phone with me. She told me how sorry she was for everything. We apologized to each other, and she begged me to take care of the children. She made me promise that I would always take care of them. She told me how scared she was. I believed her because I could hear it in her voice. I'm not a very emotional person, but I'm not going to lie. I will never forget that conversation, and I think about her a lot. Ebony died 2 days later on the floor of a hotel room by herself. Several months after her passing, I called up her boyfriend to check on him to see how he was doing. As we were talking, I mentioned to him the phone conversation I had with Ebony when she was in the hospital. Apparently, he was not aware of this conversation. He began to tell me that he had no idea that Ebony was dying. He had no idea that her liver was shutting down. He had no idea how scared she really was. She never told him anything, and they were together for over 10 years. I miss Ebony. I have not told anybody this, not even my wife, except for her daughter, the one that I'm raising. I feel so guilty, and it eats away at me. In her last moments on this earth, when she was scared the most, she called me and no one else.